everyone. My name is Cherie, and I'm the health educator for the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation. Before we start the webinar, I'd like to take a minute of your time and introduce this year's National MS Education and Awareness Month Toolkit right here. So, the theme for this year's toolkit is MS in Today's World. If you are currently subscribed to our quarterly MS Focus magazines, then please be on the lookout to receive your 2023 toolkit in the next upcoming week. If you are not subscribed with us, please respond to your registration or reminder email of this webinar, and we can add you to our mailing list. This toolkit has different activities such as checklists and worksheets that can assist in keeping you grounded, but also finding new ways to prepare you for the upcoming future of MS. There are topics in here to guide you in your personal journey of living with MS, like advice featuring one of our speakers of this month, Dr. Pearl Werfel. There's healthcare tips such as how to advocate for yourself or the latest updates on FDA-approved treatments and how to navigate within your MS community. To make this toolkit and today's webinar possible, I would like to thank our sponsors. Thank you all for your time, and I hope you enjoy this webinar.
All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this National MS Education and Awareness Month conference hosted by MS Focus, the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation, made possible with support from Biogen, Genentech, Sanofi, EMD Serono, Sandoz, Bristol Myers Squibb, and Beatrice. I am your host, Kimani Hendricks, Multimedia Communications Coordinator for MS Focus, and I'm joined by Cherie Benz, who will be talking to us this afternoon about making yourself heard by your healthcare team. Cherie Benz is a registered nurse with an additional degree in gerontology and is also an internationally certified MS nurse. She is a regular presenter of patient education programs for the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation and is a writer for MS Focus magazine. In 1994, Cherie Benz was diagnosed with RRMS, and has found that since adopting some new changes in her lifestyle, managing her MS has been much easier. And we will address all questions and comments after the presentation. Meanwhile, Cherie, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Kamani. Being heard by your healthcare team has been presented in a number of different ways over the years. But I kind of decided that I would present to you a little bit different aspect of being heard by your healthcare team. I'll start by going through some of the things that I make available to members of my healthcare team when I go in for a visit that sort of streamline the conversation. But I also want to kind of step down for a minute from my role as a nurse and the healthcare patient liaison for the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation, and talk to you as an individual who's been on a more than 40-year journey with MS. Kamani mentioned that I was diagnosed in 1994, but my first hospitalization and symptoms emerged back in 1975. So it's been more than 45 years. I really want to sort of address some of the things that maybe got in the way of my really being heard well by my healthcare team. So I will get into that as we progress, but I just want to go through some of the basics of ways that you can sort of streamline that conversation when you go into a visit. If you're seeing your doctor, whether it's your neurologist or your primary care physician or another specialist, nurse practitioner, physician's assistant, basically what I suggest that you do, and what I have done for years, is to take a current list of all of your medications and your supplements, list the dosage that you're on and the frequency with which you take those. And this is important even if you're on something like a THC gummy, for example, to manage spasticity or pain, put in the milligram of whatever gummy you're using. And so maybe you're taking a 5 milligram THC gummy for spasticity, put that in so that they know what you're taking and let them know how often you're using it. After that, I usually make a list of 2 or 3 concerns that I want to focus that visit on. If there's 10 concerns, then I would, excuse me, I didn't close this door and my husband's working in the other room, so I want to cut down some of the noise. The other thing I would recommend that you do is if you can lump like concerns together so that you don't have a big long list. And then a list of 2 or 3 questions that you want answered during that visit, and make the questions relate to the concerns. I generally put the most urgent of the concerns and the most urgent of the questions at the top of those lists so we can focus it. And then I make 2 copies of that page, and I give one to the person that I'm seeing and one for myself, just so that I can make sure that everything that's important to me is addressed on that list. If you're seeing a physical therapist or an occupational therapist, be upfront with them about things that get in the way of your workout. For example, you may be very heat intolerant. And just let them know that when you work to a certain degree, you get so overheated that things are really difficult to follow through on. The number of reps to an exercise are sometimes get in the way of really getting you a therapeutic effect of that. So if you've got a physical therapist that is pushing you to do a lot of reps to an exercise, for example, you probably want to just reorient them to the fact that with MS, your muscles can tire and shut off working effectively. And that means you've got to stop working that muscle group, or you have to cool. Most physical therapists are aware of that, but if you're going to a rehab physical therapist or a sports physical therapist, you're in the wrong place. You're not with the right physical therapist. You want somebody who is attuned to working with people with MS. Psychiatrists or psychologists. I know in the last 3 years since we've been holed up with the pandemic, we're seeing more and more of a recognition that many of us have mental health issues that we're struggling with. So you want to be very upfront with that individual if you're honest about wanting to get help. Let them know if you're having problems with cognition or anxiety, or if you feel depressed, or if you feel like the world would be a better place without you, and just let them guide the conversation from that aspect. I think honesty is always the best policy when you're going into a healthcare visit. You don't want to be underestimating things or trying to get away with something to say that it's okay. You may be concerned about how much, for example, you're drinking. And when you're asked how many glasses of wine or cans of beer do you have a day, be honest about what you do. And also make sure that you're not, that you're being really upfront about all of that and why you're doing that, and listen to any concerns about anything that you're saying. Understand if they're asking you to do something, understand what the plan is, understand why they're asking you to do something. They may be recommending a specific medication. You may be on a med that you've been on for years and something else has come out that's maybe more effective. It's not that they're trying to push a more costly product. It's not that they're in the pocket of the pharmaceutical company. there's just something that might help you more that's available now that might not have been available before. So ask them why they're recommending this and what benefit they expect you to see from this drug rather than what's ahead. So another question, and that was introduced in our Ask the MS Nurse column our Ask the MS Nurse column in the MS Focus magazine that came out a couple of weeks ago. One of our readers wrote in and said, I just feel like I'm not being heard when I go to the doctor because they're into their computer screen. And with the electronic health record, there are so many boxes that need to be checked just to get them paid for the time that they're spending with you, that many tend to be really focused on that screen for a few minutes. But I also have found that they respond really graciously when asked to please turn and face you when they're talking to you. I know for me, masks have gotten in the way of that, but I've always related better to someone when they're looking at me, when there's a face-to-face exchange. I can read their body language. I can read their eyes better. Without a mask, many people also realize how much they rely on reading lips to really understand what somebody's saying. So if you just gently ask them, if you could please face me when you're talking to me, it would help me to understand you better. And they will. One of the things that has really come clear to me is that many times over the years, my attitude has gotten in the way of a really effective healthcare visit. I spent years just in intractable pain. Part of that was due to an injury. A part of it, I'm sure, was related to some of the neuropathic pain that comes with MS on occasion. And I know that when I'm in pain, I don't sleep as well. I'm more irritable. Sometimes when it's really bad, it's almost like being a caged animal. You want to lash out at anybody that comes near you that you look at as a threat. And I know that sometimes when you get into a visit with a doctor and you're not feeling well, or you really are in pain, whether it be physical pain or emotional pain, you have a tendency to be more on edge, more irritable. If somebody's telling you it's all in your head, you may be hearing that it's all in your head when they may not actually be saying that. They may say, I'm not that familiar with MS being, or pain being a real symptom of MS. And general neurologists aren't often. They've been told for years that pain is not part of MS, and yet we now know that it is. So if you've got a neurologist that's telling you that, then you might want to consider making a visit for a second opinion to an MS clinic or MS comprehensive care center, because they really do understand the pain that comes with MS. So, act as if you were a guest in their home. You're always on better behavior when you're a guest in someone's home, and just think about how you would want them to behave if they were in your home. If you've read about a new drug or a new treatment, I know that there's been a lot of talk about things like PONS treatment, which is an electrical stimulation treatment that sort of resets areas in the brain that are not working correctly. Dr. Thrower addressed that in his talk on Tuesday of this week about new treatments coming down the pike. That talk is available right now on the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation page, as it will be for the next week or so until it goes up on our YouTube channel. So go and watch that for a description. He has a couple of good slides on that treatment and a description of that. or something like the tau patch, which we've been hearing a lot about on social media about improving balance. That particular therapy, I believe, is a money-making scheme. There's been nothing to show that it really works. The testimonials that are up on the website are clearly glowing and probably written by members of the company. And there's really very little about that product that is helpful. So if you've read about something like that, or a new medication that's in the pipeline or has just come on the market, ask them about what they know about it. Feel free to take them a print off if you've pulled something off the web, and have an honest discussion with them. Don't go in with your mind made up, but from what you've read or what you've seen, you might want to go in with a list of pros and cons of it and use that to help ask questions. I found that this dialogue back and forth really helps to build a relationship with members of the healthcare team, and it breeds respect. And when there's an air of respect there, there's an air of listening. There, you're heard more fully. When you're going into a new therapy or change of medications, be realistic about the benefit. What do you see happening? There's a lot of people out there that think that going on to a newer medicine or more highly effective medicine is going to reverse what's going on with them. Dr. Boster has been very clear about, in many of his talks to us, about the fact that these medicines, although they may improve symptoms for some people, do not change the fact that there's damage there. They don't heal that damage, at least not yet. And so we can't expect to get out of a wheelchair and get back to walking without some major interventions beyond a specific medication. So be realistic about that. The meds can, oftentimes, some of the more highly effective medications can almost turn off the actions of MS once you're stabilized on the medicine, so that you're not having events that are causing more damage, and so that you're not progressing quite as quickly. But it doesn't generally heal some of the stuff that's going on. What I've found in my personal life is that as I've gotten onto a medication that's addressed some of the inflammation and the activity of MS, things have kind of quieted there, and I sort of feel like I'm coming up for air, and I'm not so oppressed by what's going on with the MS symptoms. They're easier to manage. And I think when that happens, I move more. I have a little bit more stamina. The fatigue isn't quite as intense. And I went through a period after I got on my second disease modifying therapy, where after 6 months or so on the medication, I found I was moving more, I was more active, I was less reliant on my scooter, I was not using my canes as much, particularly indoors. And that gradually got me into more of a manageable exercise routine, and cooking more, as is a buzzword these days, more cleanly, meaning I was cooking everything from scratch. Nothing pre-prepared was coming into my house. And getting rid of that junk in my diet also helped me to feel better. I began literally waking up, being more energized, having more energy. And so those conversations with our healthcare team can kind of get us on track for improvement, both improvement in stopping the MS disease process from continuing to go downhill, and also in really being realistic in our conversation with members of our healthcare team about what can I expect from this drug. Many people are hesitant to start a medication because of the side effects of a particular medication. But what I've found is that the side effects of the medicines that have helped me the most, even though they're touted to be pretty strong side effects, I haven't experienced. The side effects I've experienced from a couple of the drugs that I've been on have been very positive side effects of slowing the relapse rate and severity, getting me completely away from relapses, helping me to have more energy, less fatigue, less pain. All of those side effects I consider side effects of a medication as well. So I have been on a couple of meds where the side effects have not been good, but I think that's an entirely individual response. So if somebody tells you this was a horrible medicine for me, it may have been a horrible medicine for them, but you may not know the whole story. They may not have been well hydrated while they were taking the medication. And many of the side effects that come from our meds are from not being well hydrated. So keep an open mind. Talk to your doctor or your nurse practitioner about why they're recommending something, what to expect with it. Develop a real understanding of the program and realistic expectations. Give your medication, if possible, 6 to 12 months before even considering switching a medication to something else, because it takes that long for most of them to really start working well. And you may not find that any new disease-modifying therapy is going to manage all of your symptoms. So be open with members of your healthcare team about symptoms that are really impacting the quality of life for you. You may need some help medicinally or through physical therapy to help manage those symptoms. So be open to that. This issue of MS Focus magazine, which came out just a couple of weeks ago, it's the winter 2023 issue, focuses on the different members of our healthcare team and what their roles and responsibilities are. Page 8 gives a checklist so that you can look at how your relationship is with your doctor and perhaps highlight ways that you can better be heard by focusing on something that you look at as maybe an area that needs improvement. Page 9 goes on and talks about, page 9 talks about how to fire your doctor if you're not a good fit. So if you find that there's more on page 8 that's negative than positive, you might want to read page 9 and figure out how to target that new relationship. Page 13 in that magazine talks about why all of us living with multiple sclerosis need a physical therapist as a member of our healthcare team. I don't see a physical therapist regularly, even though gait is often a part of my problem, but I do go in probably once or twice a year just for a tune-up or a checkup. I don't sit there and do exercises with them because I find that's not a good use of my time and energy. I have left appointments with a physical therapist where I have been so exhausted by the end of the appointment that I didn't feel safe driving home. So I know personally, I do better to ask them, if they're asking me to do an exercise, I ask them to demonstrate it. I return the demonstration. I ask them how often they would like me to aim to do that exercise on a regular basis. And I move on to the next instruction. And I make a commitment to do that at home. Physical therapy is not a place for us to have stuff done to us. It's a place to be mentored and to be trained so that we can help ourselves. how each discipline might meet the needs in your care is also outlined in that edition. And on page 34 in the edition, you could read all about Kamani, our hostess today. The cooling program application is on page 47. The foundation does a cooling program from February 1st to June 1st every year. The MS Association of America also has a cooling program that kind of picks up the slack when we are not having our program. So we try to work in conjunction with each other. So go ahead and read through the application in that magazine and see if there's not a way that we can get you into cooling equipment that might help to make your spring and summer a little bit more comfortable. If you're not getting the MS Focus magazine yet and wish to get it, respond to your registration email or send an email to support@msfocus.org and get your copy, get onto our mailing list. This comes out quarterly. The other thing you can do is to go to our website, www.msfocus.org, and go to publications, and you can see every quarterly issue for the last several years and read it page by page. Soak up that information. I think at this point, I'm going to let Kamani keep her eye on the chat and on Facebook, and I will look at your questions in the Q&A. Coleman asks, what happens when you have questions about vitamins, supplements, and your providers don't have answers and don't know how to respond? That's a good question, Coleman. I think a lot of our providers really don't get that as part of their education. And we certainly have quite a bit of information on our web page, www.msfocus.org, on vitamins, on supplements, on nutrition. There are webinars on our YouTube page, the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation YouTube page, on nutrition and on vitamins and supplements. So just tick that into the search bar. Many nutritionists, people that bill themselves as nutritionists, often have product lines that augment their income from their practice. And many of those are combination vitamins and supplements, and are actually detrimental, could be detrimental to the individual living with MS. As a rule of thumb, MS is a condition that causes our immune systems to go into overdrive, to become hyperactive, and that causes them to turn on us and damage our nerves, which is why we have a lot of the symptoms we have in progression from MS. And sometimes taking some of those supplemental concoctions, anything that says boosts immune system, you don't want to take. Sometimes something as simple and common as echinacea can create an increase in symptoms for people with MS. So we do know that you need to take vitamin D. People with low levels of vitamin D usually do less well, usually have more disease activity than those of us that can keep our vitamin D levels above 50, even though 30 is generally listed as low normal. So vitamin D, definitely for everybody. Sometimes vitamin B12 or even a B complex can be helpful because they tend to impact the nervous system. Other than that, there are very few vitamins that we really need unless we're deficient in them. And certainly when you get in front of that doctor and they don't know the answers, and you've read something, for example, on Facebook, somebody's taking magnesium or zinc or something like that, you can ask them when you have your next blood work done to draw a level of that to see if you're deficient. And if you are deficient, then certainly supplementation might be helpful. I hope that answered your question, Coleman. Ben asks, is it the practice of self-advocacy well accepted by non-MS medical professionals? Example, your primary care physician, your ear, nose, and throat, or others? Let's see. Angela says, I too have had doctors tell me MS doesn't cause that. It's equally frustrating is I've seen worse. I never know how to best respond to that. Any questions or any suggestions? Angela, I'm so sorry. That's probably going to be discussed in page 9 of the MS Focus magazine, how to fire your doctor. That would certainly be something that I think if I were with that individual, I would probably say, well, I'm sure you have, but I'm living with this, and to me, this is worse. Make it personal. Let them know that they're not living with this. They may have somebody that could have made a better case than what you're making. That doesn't mean that their case was worse. So be honest with them, but be respectful when you're making that statement. Isa says, how often should I see my neurologist? My current schedule is once or twice a year after my annual MRI. If you're relatively stable, that's as often as you need to see your neurologist. Your primary care doctor can handle anything else on a regular basis. I see my neurologist twice a year. I see my primary care doctor quarterly. And if the 2 visits happen to be scheduled within a week or 2 of each other, I call my primary care and let them know that I'm seeing my neurologist so they don't have to see me if there's nothing pressing going on. All right. And Angela says, thank you. So
I
that's,
just wanted to step in for a moment. If we do
Okay.
have anyone who's with us and they've never attended Zoom, and if you don't know how to ask the question, you can do what a few of the others have done. You can either type them into the chat or the Q&A boxes. If you want to ask a question anonymously, you have that option using Q&A as well. And you can always raise your hand if you don't feel like typing things out and speak directly to Cherie. And if you are watching us from Facebook, we do encourage that if you have a question or comment, just add it in the section, the comment section below. I don't see anything in chat, and I don't think that there is anything on Facebook as of yet, but you did mention, Cherie, earlier how they could read the winter issue if they are not subscribed. And thank you for that, because we do have a promo coming up for release for MS Focus's Winter 2023 magazine. It will be on social media soon. And also that link to reading our issue archives is on msfocusmagazine.org. So you can go there and select the issue archives button, which is right next to the subscribe button on the homepage, and it'll show you every single magazine issue we've published since 2016. So we've got a lot of content on there that you guys can revisit. I actually did have a question of my own. Earlier, you were talking about mental health care, and from my experience, I know that for some strange reason, they don't necessarily consider mental health physical health, and it's not really insured. And I think that's unfortunate. Do you know of any recommendations where, and if someone is on a low budget, or what they can do to take care of their mental health as well? Because I do think that it is part of physical care too.
yeah. Most insurance companies cover a visit or a limited number of visits to a mental health professional. There may be a copay of $10 or $25 per visit for that. So for many people, that is doable. If you haven't found somebody that you really like with going to whatever's available for mental health concerns in your area, betterhelp.com may be an option. It is a mental health subscription service. I've found that it's not particularly financially friendly. I think it's something like $380 a month, but that entitles you to 4 visits per month and unlimited texts or emails to your therapist. They also have a sliding scale so that if your income is lower, they work with you on a lower income sliding scale for the fee. So they might take the fee down to $50 or $60 a visit instead of $120. Many of our community health centers have that work on sliding pay scales have a mental health professional that they can refer you to. So even if you're uninsured, you can get mental health care through them. Lots of different ways. I would just recommend that, a lot of self-care goes into mental health, not mental illness, but mental health. If you're really conscious about making sure you're getting enough sleep, that you're eating a healthy, well-balanced diet, that you're moving, that you're getting some exercise, that you've got something to stimulate you, such as a hobby or books to read that you're interested in, that you're maybe doing some volunteerism and giving back to the community. Those things all are boosts to mental health. They all help to combat mental illness. So I hope that answers your question, Kamani.
It does.
I've got a couple more questions. Isa says, besides lifestyle changes, is there anything that can be prescribed to help with fatigue and bladder issues? These are 2 symptoms that really affect my quality of life. Certainly, there are things that can be done to help with fatigue. Exercise has been shown to be one of the biggest things that you can do to relieve fatigue, because a lot of our fatigue actually is caused by deconditioning. When we don't move, when we're exhausted, when we've come out of a relapse, when we've been bedridden with an illness, and we get out of condition very, very quickly. When I was back working on the floors in nursing probably 30 years ago, we used to say that if we had somebody who was older than say 65 or had a chronic illness, if they were in a hospital bed for 3 days, it was going to take them 3 weeks to get back the strength that they'd lost from that 3 days in bed. And that's always made me aware of the fact that, if I've had a relapse or an injury and I'm not as mobile, it's going to take me longer to get back to that stage, and I'm going to be more fatigued until I get back there. So exercise is certainly helpful. There are medications that can help fatigue. They're not all that helpful for most people. Most people will take them every day, and that's a major, major mistake. These medications lose their effectiveness if you're taking them every day. So when I was taking medications for fatigue, I took them on days that I knew I had to have the greatest physical and mental sharpness. And I didn't take them on days where I might not have to be quite as on tap. So let's see, Angela, I work for an insurance company, And I can attest what Cherie said is true. An outcome of the pandemic is insurance companies realizing the importance of ensuring members have access to mental health services. Thank you for that input, Angela. And don't forget about online mental health. I'm starting with one that I found through the MS Society site. Thank you. I'm also seeing a mental health counselor through online mental health. And it's not through BetterHelp. Mine is 100% paid by my health insurance. And that recommendation came from my primary care provider. So yes, online is certainly an option. And let's see, we've got a couple in the chat. Kamani, you want to read those?
Those are actually
Those
from
are
me.
all right.
I
So
was giving them resources, and yes, I heard you wrong. It's betterhelp.com, guys, not help.
betterhelp.com. Not better health, it's better HELP.com. So keep your eye on the chat, folks. Kamani may be popping some resources in there for you. Are there any other questions out there?
I don't see any from Facebook. I don't think so.
All right, I just wanted to recap. So you want to be prepared when you go into your appointment. Take that information on your medications, your supplements, your concerns, your questions about that visit. So don't just go in and expect them to pull out of you what you need. These appointments are too short already. So you really need to go in focused and prepared about what to expect from that appointment, or you're likely to be disappointed. One of the best ways to be heard is to approach this as a business. It's your business. Your health is your business. And so you want to tend to it with the same seriousness that you would give a project in your work. Be honest. Don't try to rationalize something that you're doing or how you're doing it in order to gain approval, because you can get more help from your healthcare team by being blatantly honest with them. Be respectful. You're in their living room instead of them being in your living room. So think about how you would want a guest to be treated by you in your living room, and treat them in the same way that you would expect to be treated. Be inquisitive. Ask questions about the plan of care that's being proposed. Ask questions about things that you've heard about or been told about by others who have used them or seen information on them. As to whether or not your member of your healthcare team has heard about them, if they feel that they are going to be helpful or should be tried or don't probably cause any harm, so it won't hurt anything to try them if you want to. I invite you to re-watch this recording after we're done if you missed something and didn't have a paper and pencil in front of you. This recording is going to be up on the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation Facebook page indefinitely, and within a week or so it probably will be up on our YouTube page once it's been sort of edited, maybe the phone call taken out of it. Keep that information up your sleeve. We've got another question in Q&A. Nahora, what are the biomarkers for diagnosing MS? Is blood work used? Oh, great question. We don't really have specific biomarkers that have been used in the diagnostic process to date. there's a lot of blood work that's done to get to a diagnosis generally, and that's because MS and many other diseases mimic each other. There are a number of different conditions that cause lesions on MRIs, so we have to rule those out. Things like Lyme disease or lupus or migraines. Some rheumatoid arthritis patients even have some lesions in their brain. So all of those conditions have to be ruled out before MS can be ruled in. There is a new blood test that's just starting to be used called neurofilament light chain. It is quite costly. It's not specific to MS. It is there because it picks up on inflammation within the system. That said, it tends to be elevated with MS, with Parkinson's, with Alzheimer's. All of those things we've now found it has an elevation in. So that can sort of steer them in the direction of MS if you're not looking like you've got Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. And it may be elevated in a lot of other conditions. Those are the ones that I know that it's been studied in to date. Lumbar puncture or spinal tap is often used to see if your MRI looks suggestive but might not be a slam dunk as far as MS is concerned. You may be asked to have a lumbar puncture or spinal tap. What they're looking for in that is oligodendrocytes or O bands, which are the byproduct of damage to the covering of your nerve sheath. It's like they've stripped off the insulation on the electrical wire, and those cells are in the spinal fluid. If you're not having an active relapse, if you don't have active disease going on, you may not have any of that. You may still have MS and not have those in your spinal fluid, but that can really help to hone in and give them a little more clarity on what's going on. So I hope that answered your question. An anonymous attendee asks, I was recently diagnosed with osteoarthritis in both knees. Should I see a physical therapist that's familiar with MS? Yes, if you have MS, you should be seeing a physical therapist that's familiar with MS. Oftentimes, if you're going to a physical therapist because of knee pain, they may be a rehab therapist and they may be working you hard to get that knee pain taken care of. So if you don't have somebody that is familiar with working with people with MS, certainly a physical therapist that's used to working with older adults or people who have chronic health problems would be better than working with a rehab or sports therapist. Anyone else? Well, I hope this has been helpful, and I really, as I was thinking about doing this program, last year we did one on making the most of your healthcare visit, and that is on our YouTube page. Building a Stronger MS Community is on our YouTube page. And those were some of the tips that I used in those talks about being prepared for your visit, getting the most out of your visit. But I think being heard, as I was mulling that topic over the last couple of weeks, it began to occur to me that I felt heard when I was less confrontational, when I was less insistent on something, when I was able to recognize that it was pain and frustration that was driving the intensity of my conversation, my dialogue. So if you can be aware of that in yourself and just take a deep breath and try to ramp it down a little bit, I think you'll be more readily heard and more generously responded to. So be nice to yourself and give yourself a little slack, and remember your doctor, your nurse practitioner is human too, and they may be going through stuff as well. So be gentle.
Thank you for that. I agree. That does bring us to the end of our time, but if you did miss any part of the conference, as Cherie mentioned earlier, you can go to the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation Facebook page and watch the live stream that will appear as soon as we close out on Zoom here. And within the week, it will also be on the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation YouTube channel as well, as we are speeding up the process of getting these educational conferences uploaded sooner so that you guys can take a look back at them. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for times and access information. Our next conference will be this coming Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on the 21st with a panel, and they'll be talking about giving back to the MS community. And once again, we do thank our sponsors, Biogen, Genentech, EMD Serrano, Sanofi, Sandoz, Bristol Myers Squibb, and Viatris. Hope I didn't forget anybody. And we thank all of the attendees for participating and just for sitting and listening. And Cherie, as always, we're glad to have you. We appreciate your knowledge and willingness to share with the community. It's good to see you, and we hope to see you guys all again soon.
Oh, thank you. And if anybody does need to reach out to me, if there's a question that comes up, you can reach me at msnurse@msfocus.org, and I do answer your emails.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.